Friends, welcome to our midweek moment. Pastor Nicole here. So glad you clicked on. This weekend, we wrapped up our sermon series, Bad Blood, Exploring Why Forgiveness Matters. And we wrapped it up by really focusing on why does forgiveness matter? I think we all know we're supposed to forgive, but why? Why do we have to do it? And one of the things I used in the sermon was a metaphor of like a heavy bag that we have to carry. And so I had a book bag that I filled with books and talking about how when we don't forgive, we are just carrying this heavy burden and we are harming ourselves. We are really harming ourselves when we don't forgive others. After the service, one of my parishioners said, "This has been a really challenging series, but what I find hardest about forgiveness is forgiving myself." And I thought, yes, that is so hard. In fact, in the book of Forgiving, which we've been reading through for this series by Desmond and Umpo Tutu, they have a whole chapter dedicated to forgiving yourself. And how do you do that? And why do you do that? And in the book, they talk about how just like it is a heavy burden when we don't forgive someone else, it's the same, if not worse, when we don't forgive ourselves. And he talks a lot in there about the difference between guilt and shame and how we hold a lot of shame for ourselves when we do something wrong that we just can't seem to forgive. So if you haven't read this book and you are holding on to some unforgiveness for yourself, even if you just read this chapter, it is worth the price of the book. Let me share a little something that he writes in here. Because one of the things I think about when we forgive ourselves is we feel like we're letting ourselves off the hook, like we are skipping over any punishment or justice that we, may need. And so sometimes we hold on to unforgiveness because we feel like we have to punish ourselves. And this is what he writes. He says, "Make no mistake, we must be accountable for our actions. But when we stay stuck in the unhappy story of what we have done, when we make an identity out of our past actions, we deny ourselves the gift of transformation. We can all learn from the mistakes of our past. Learning from the past is not the same as being held hostage by what we have done." I thought that was so good and such a reminder that we do not have to be held hostage by our mistakes. We do not have to be held hostage by unforgiveness, even for ourselves. We can grant ourselves forgiveness. And why? Because it matters. Otherwise, we are doing harm to ourselves, to our emotional being, to our physical being. Like, we know that unforgiveness is really terrible for our physical health as well as our mental health. And so when we find ourselves in a place of not feeling like we can forgive ourselves, we have to start walking that fourfold path that we talked about in a previous week, that we have to choose to not get revenge on ourselves, right, by holding this burden and punishing ourselves. But we have to choose to walk the path of forgiveness, the cycle of forgiveness, and that fourfold path, just like we do with any other forgiveness that we need granted. It's really the same. It might be a little harder, I think, to forgive ourselves than maybe to forgive others sometimes, but we have to do it because it is worth it in the end. So I hope you have gleaned something from this series. If you haven't had a chance to read this book, I know I've said it before, but it is just really excellent reading. And somebody in the study, we were doing a study on this book on Sundays, and we wrapped it up on Sunday, and he said, "This is one of those books that you're going to have to read over and over." He's like every couple of years, you're just going to need to read it and remind yourself of the importance of granting forgiveness to someone else. And I think that is so true. So if you buy it, it's not just a one-time read, you'll read it again. I hope you will pick up a copy and take a look at it. I think there is so much wisdom in here. As we think about forgiveness and kind of wrap up this series, I hope it is something that you will think about, pray about, and find a way forward for any unforgiveness you might be holding in your heart, whether it's for somebody else or for yourself, or if you need to seek forgiveness, that you will be able to do that in a way that honors the other person, honors God, and honors yourself, so that you're not holding that burden anymore. So as we move forward, let's all work on forgiveness. It's something everybody has to experience, granting forgiveness and asking for forgiveness. It's one of the commonalities of being human. So we might as well start thinking about it and working on it in our lives. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Join us this weekend. We're jumping into a new sermon series on the life of David in the Old Testament. 1st and 2nd Samuel we'll be looking at over the next couple of weeks. I'm excited about that. So we'll see you whether in person or online. Have a great day.